Hey guys, today in the Analects of Confucius 6.26, Confucius actively rebukes the lie that a humane person or a benevolent person has to sacrifice themselves or be naive just in order to be good or just in order to do good things. And in other words, benevolence, or you could call it humaneness, does not require self-abandonment, does not require selflessness. And 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 the moral of this story is that you don't have to be a fool to be a good person. And without further ado, let's get started. 6.26. Zai Wo asked, if a humane person, a 人人, is told that someone is stuck in a well, would he go down the well himself to see what he could do? The master said, why would he do that? A gentleman, a 君子, can go and take a look, but he is not going to hurl himself into a trap. He can be deceived, but not ensnared. Okay, so Zai Wo was one of the core 10 disciples of Confucius, and he was known for his eloquence and mainly, like we see here, his repetitive questioning of Confucius's moral principles and what Confucius is trying to teach. And in this case, he's targeting benevolence. And so focused on his belief that a benevolent person has to always help a person in need, he's deliberately setting up a trap, a moral dilemma for Confucius. And we'll see what that is in a second, but let's just break the wording down in the first sentence a little bit. Let's see what Zai Wo says. So he says that if a humane man, a 人人, so the actual original text doesn't actually say 人人, but it kind of hints at the next phrase. Is told that someone is stuck in a well. So you might notice that 人 and 人, they look like the same word in English, and they're pronounced the same in Chinese, but of course they're written differently. But this is kind of like a play on words that Zai Wo is doing here to convey his meaning. So 人 人人 is kind of like humane man. So humane, the word for humaneness or benevolence is the same as the word for man or person. And so you could have two different meanings here. First, that someone is stuck in a well, or that humaneness or benevolence is stuck in a well. And actually, the second one, the latter, is what the actual original text in the Analects 6.26 actually mentions. It's the word, it's the 人 that means humaneness. Apparently it's deliberately chosen to be written as humaneness in here. So it's actually that benevolence is stuck in a well. But it's also concluded that you could also say someone is stuck in a well because of the clever wordplay that Zai Wo has chosen to do. And so in the second meaning, here is what Zai Wo's actual moral dilemma for Confucius is. So either the benevolent person jumps in the well, and it is actually later revealed that the well might just be a deadly trap, and so either the benevolent person jumps in the well, and that's kind of a really reckless thing to do, right? It proves that virtue is reckless and suicidal, or the benevolent person refuses to jump in the well, which also indicates that the benevolent person isn't benevolent at all because he's not choosing to help the alleged person in the well. Okay, so now let's see what Confucius said. So the master said, why would he do that? So again, just like straight up denying that dilemma thing. So a gentleman, a 君子, can go and take a look, but he is not going to hurl himself into a trap. He can be deceived but not ensnared. So a gentleman, aka a 君子, is Confucius's ideal, like the ideal man in Confucius's point of view. And this person is humane, benevolent, but also, like we'll talk about at the end, wise. So Confucius says that the gentleman will go and take a look. Breaking this down a bit, in the original text, it says more than go and take a look. It actually says rush. So the 君子 will just naturally just rush into the scene, get there as quick as he could. And then he'll go take a look, as in he'll assess the situation, and he's going to help in any way that he can, and maybe even call for help, or maybe throw down a rope in there, or anything like that. But he is not going to hurl himself into a trap, and that is just like recklessly jumping into the well, maybe even successfully killing himself in the process, as in like being lured into a deadly trap and actually falling for it. So the sentence that we just dissected a little bit is saying that the gentleman will rush to the scene and actually take a look, assess the situation before doing anything, and then maybe either and then do anything that he could to help, but he is not going to run in there and jump in head first into the well. He's not that reckless. He has benevolence, he has humaneness, but he also needs to have wisdom. And then he says that he can be deceived but not ensnared. So deceived, this word is has the suggested connotation in the original text that the 君子 could be lied to, could believe something that is plausible, or something that seems to be true, seems to be reasonable, seems to be able to happen in real life, but he cannot be ensnared. And that just means that he will not blindly fall into a trap in which the reasoning is absolutely impossible or against all reason. He will not be misled by something that is completely out of reason. It's something that's completely impossible. And so Confucius, by saying all of this, is saying that a gentleman can be trustful in others, but he's not going to be reckless. Sure, they'll believe someone who said that a person is stuck in a well because that was a reasonable common occurrence back then, but he will absolutely not fall for an illogical conclusion, an illogical claim that a benevolent person has to immediately jump into the well just to prove that he is benevolent. And so a benevolent person will never abandon their moral common sense just to fall for a trick, or maybe even fall into, let's say, peer pressure, or maybe just even their own ego, their glory, apparently, alleged glory that they get for jumping into the well and saving people. And then, again, like I've kind of foreshadowed in my explanation, Confucius is also saying that benevolence and wisdom should never be separated. And so true benevolence needs the company of wisdom. And he does say this in 6.23, where he says that benevolence or humaneness and wisdom are really the two complementary pillars of virtue, and they can never go separately from each other. And an example could be, a person who says they are quote unquote kind, but maybe if he is either foolish or naive or reckless, then he's not being benevolent. That's really just being careless. Because again, true benevolence can never exist without wisdom, without common sense. So a 君子 should naturally have both sides. And so he should be both benevolent and wise, and also compassionate and rational at the same time. And so just to recap, Zai Wo's moral dilemma, alleged moral dilemma, because Confucius really did just wiggle his way out of that. So Zai Wo said that you either have to jump in the well or say that you're not benevolent. And Confucius teaches us that that's really not how life works. Because, first of all, moral virtue isn't proved by some kind of reckless thing that you have to do. And being a good person doesn't mean that you have to abandon yourself in hopes of trying to save others. You don't have to sacrifice yourself. You don't have to think of yourself any less than you think of others. You don't have to be something that other people can just step on. And you don't have to sacrifice your own well-being. And you don't have to ignore your own common sense to do something to prove yourself or something like that. Because, well, in my own opinion, I don't think moral sense, and you should never feel pressured to accept self-destructive terms in order to prove your moral virtue, which honestly, moral virtue, first of all, can't be proved by a single thing, and also, again, you shouldn't ignore your own common sense and what is actually good to do for you versus what is reckless, or what is actually the case versus what is just set by other people. And also Confucius teaches us that there's often a third way that accounts for both sides of the equation, both being compassionate and having common sense, and the fact that actually either or situations are almost every time just man-made, just artificial. And so, yeah, the next time you feel peer pressure to do whatever it is that you have to do in order to quote-unquote prove yourself, you can, of course, either just completely reject that if it's absolutely unreasonable, or find a middle way, which is what Confucius teaches all of us to do. And yeah, that'll be all today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!